It's Ray from the Teach Better team, and I have the best person in the world with me on live, Miss Tiffany Ott.
You're making me blush. Hi, Ray. How are
Well,
you?
Tiff, not only did I really miss you, because while we've talked, I haven't actually gotten to see you in a little bit, so it's nice to see your face.
I know.
But also, your chat tonight. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I was really, really excited about it. It was like, did exactly what I wanted it to do. I was so excited.
I have to say, Tiff, the first thing I was told to ask you from Jeff was how the chat was. So can you give us maybe a one-word response?
I think you know what that word is. It was awesome. Like it was really awesome. You know, I've had the chat on my calendar for a while, a couple months. And last week I was sitting there and I was like, oh, what am I going to talk about? Because I've talked about tech. I've talked about mastery learning. I've talked about a ton of different things. I'm like, I can't keep doing the same thing. So assessment. And then I just kind of threw it together and was really excited with the way that it ended up working out. So I am excited. I think that assessment, you know, is really something that we don't talk about all that much, except to say, oh, there's another assessment, or, oh, I have to do this assessment. And I think that teachers, you know, we don't get a ton of training as education majors on how exactly. Did I lose Ray?
I'm back.
Oh, that was weird.
Yeah, pop back in.
Okay, that works. You know, but I barely got any training on assessment. And I go into my first job and it's like, here's the unit test. And I'm like, okay, this is assessment. But that's not assessment. And it's not even a tiny fraction of the pie that is assessment. And so tonight was really all about like diving deeper into assessment beyond a test, assessment beyond a unit test. And what does that look like and why does it matter? Ray?
Yeah.
Ray's gone.
Again?
Seeing a big black screen.
Oh, man.
Tina, I see your comments. So much great stuff to think about. My brain is just turned. I think about assessment a lot, but tonight there were a lot of things that I saw and I was like, oh, I have to think about even deeper into what they were saying. Ray? Are you there?
I am
here. Okay. She's difficulties. I'm dying. What's it doing to you, Ray?
I can see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. It's just like freaking out.
Okay. So if you disappear, I'll just keep talking and it'll be good.
I can hear you and your insight was fabulous.
Why, thank you.
Gosh.
So yeah, Tina, tons of good things to go back and find and dig into. And I'm going to be reaching out to some of the people on there because there was some insight that I want to dig a little bit deeper into. So really good chat.
Well, now I'm all thrown by being a ghost for a period of time. But I think I'm echoing now. Can you hear me echoing?
Nope, you're good.
I'm losing my mind. What I did want to say, Tiffany, was that I really loved how when you originally talked about assessment, I went into a very rigorous regiment of like, this is what assessment is. It was very serious in my mind. I'm like, this is how you design an assessment. This is where my mind went. And what I loved about the chat was it was not about assessment being this very strict in a square, box. It was, okay, how do we make assessment innovative? How do we bring new life to assessments? How do you do it without it being a quiet paper pencil end of the year or end of a unit assessment? But there was great discussion on why do we as teachers need to pick the date for the assessment? Why can an assessment be student driven? All these elements, it's so important. It was great discussion tonight.
Well, and I have had a bone to pick about summative assessments for a very long time. Jen, Yes, yes. Okay, so we talk assessment, we talk tests, we talk standardized tests, we talk all that kind of stuff, and that completely misses the boat. And that's what this chat was all about. And so I was saying, summative assessment, I absolutely hate that term with a fiery passion. And when we think about assessment, that's what we think of. And it's dumb because when do we ever give our students an assessment and then close the book and move on? Or I shall rephrase this. When should we ever do that? And the answer is we never should. Every assessment we give is formative. Like if I give my kids a test on algebra, I don't know, graphing linear equations, and I give them the test and I have some kids who do not understand it, does that mean I never have to talk about linear equations again? No, that test has informed my understanding. And even like some people argue, okay, well, at the end of the year, you have to put a grade in the grade book. Yes. But let's think about what the teacher the next year does. They get back those state standardized assessments. They look at it and they say, what areas are this group of students struggling in? And what, so it's formative. It's all formative. So this whole like summative assessment thing, I hate that word. That's my
Well, and I think you bring up a really interesting point of teachers needing to have a better understanding of, are we viewing an assessment as completing a task? Mm-hmm. Or are we viewing it as a growth model? And I liked that challenge during the Twitter chat. I think when you talk philosophy about assessment, teachers are like, yes, it's supposed to drive instruction. Yes, it's supposed to evaluate student understanding. And I saw a lot of teachers early on in the chat say, great, but that's unmanageable, so it doesn't actually happen. Or, yeah, that's a great philosophy, but it's not possible with 34 students in the classroom. And then I saw this huge movement of, no, it is possible. Yes. Your journey to grow as an educator and do all things you want to do is possible. Don't let your own, journey stop because you haven't found a solution yet. And so it's this whole movement of, okay, so what do you do? How can we share? Because there are teachers that are able to do the dream. And if you're not there yet, don't let your journey stop because you just haven't figured it out. Like that's what this PLN, that's what this network is about. Let's talk about how to make assessments powerful for our students rather than just checking a box and being like, oh, I gave the test on fractions. What's the problem?
And every time I moderate a chat, like that is my sole goal. How can I take whatever topic I'm talking about and get people to a point where they're actually digging into the conversation, not just, spitting stuff out, but I want to challenge you. Like you post something, I'm going to follow up with a challenge to try and dig deeper into your thinking. It's the same thing we do with students, right? Like we are all each other's teachers. That's why I love Twitter, because we learn so much from each other. And there were a lot of opportunities in this chat for, I don't have the answers. I am by no means an expert on assessment, but I think the more that we challenge each other and say, tell me more about that and tell me why you think that and tell me how these things work together or don't work together. Like that's where the power really happens in groups of educators coming together.
Well, and Tiffany, I'm not just saying this to make you blush, but honestly, you are a master at that when you do Twitter chats. I need to learn more about how to better facilitate those deep discussions because, we both host Twitter chats like once a week or twice a week. Constantly. But to be able to have those rich discussions is because of a really strong host forcing teachers to challenge their thinking and be students. And I thought that was really cool throughout this chat. So just so you know, in case you forgot how awesome you are, it's great.
Thank you. I love talking to Ray because she's always just like telling me I'm fabulous. It's really good for my self-esteem. But there's
no, go ahead.
Oh, hang on. Keith has a comment. How do we put a number to sitting next to a kid and saying, hey, that is cool. Have you tried this? Yeah. And assessment doesn't need numbers. Like at one point in the chat, we were talking about formative assessment and how we formative assess. And I cannot say enough times, a conversation with a student is more valuable than any assessment I can give. So a story to share. We're talking about, so the course that I'm teaching right now, we kind of go through a journey of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and look at how that all applies to linear equations and absolute value equations and graphing. And it's really fun. But so we're talking about division, and she really is. And so the topic of dividing by 0 came up. And some of my students are like, oh, there's no solution. I'm like, yeah, why? Like, let's dig into this. And so we talked about it as a class, and that was last class. So today they were all working on like their individual mastery learning grid that we talk about all the time. And I call them up one by one and I say, what's 5 divided by 0? And they say, no solution. And then I say, why? And in an instant, I can gauge this kid really gets it. This kid is getting there. They don't have the full internalized understanding. This kid is confused about this topic, or this kid really doesn't understand. And it's just like
spitting out information.
Just like that. So it was a 30-second conversation with each kid. And then I can go back and say, I want you to go back and look at the patterns we discovered last week and think about this. And then it's just this back and forth. And that is powerful assessment. That is better than any test I could give.
But teachers don't believe that you can do that in a manageable way with a class of 34. And not saying I'm a great teacher. I have a ton to learn, so much. And I am learning every day. It's been my goal this year to connect with educators doing things so much better than I am and learn something.
Yeah.
I'm having a conversation with every student in my classroom on every assessment. It is completely possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And
absolutely.
It's funny that we're talking about this because you were talking about how there's like the number doesn't matter, you need the conversation. I literally just posted that on Instagram. That's been my theme for the whole week. I've been posting like how to revamp your assessments. So all you out there, go on Instagram, go look at this stuff. There's but I gave examples of assessments, how to build them. So
nice.
Go learn, go figure it out.
Yes, exactly. Open up, find it. Well, and then I want to move for a minute to like the bookend on the mastery chat, the last 2 questions, which it's something that I am like really into and really passionate about spreading the word. And that's assessment as learning and something called retrieval practice. And so
today for you.
I know, like, okay, so there's something that my mom taught me to do when I was in college and I had my first round of midterms and I was panicking because I had no idea how to study. And she said, Tiffany, go through the chapter, make flashcards, practice the flashcards, make a quiz for yourself, take the quiz and grade it and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, you're a genius. And I did that and I did pretty good on the midterm exams. And I find that students who are good at school, right? Good test takers, good studiers, they do all of these kinds of things. And maybe they had a mom telling them to do it. Maybe it was like a natural response for them, but that kind of assessment, like that making a quiz for yourself, quizzing yourself on flashcards, it is not as natural or obvious as those of us who are good at it think it should be. And so the actual act of trying to retrieve the information from your brain, okay, let's get into brain science because I love brain science, right? So when you learn something, right, in your brain, what's actually happening is neurons are connecting. That's great. We like that. The more times you think about it or learn about it, the neuron connection gets stronger and stronger. But there's another neural connection that we frequently ignore or do not properly prepare our students to do. And that's the connection from the thought or the idea, bringing it out of the brain, right? It's the neural connection to retrieve it. And that neural connection is as valuable, as critical, as important as the actual learning and understanding. It's why you can watch a YouTube video on a topic and be like, I get that. That makes sense. I understand it. But then going to explain that to somebody else and retrieving it from your brain is not the same process. And so by teaching our students how to retrieve information through assessment as learning, we are building those neural pathways. And that's what we have to do with our students. So I get really excited about that.
Well, and I know that we've kind of already passed it, but it goes directly back to the last conversation we had about having conversations about assessments. It's not just about taking in the information and just telling you the one element, but fully explaining it, pulling all that information out and putting it together in their own words, fully developing that understanding, because that's how you get that back and forth connection. I think that's so powerful.
Absolutely. And I think that it's likely that most of us in education have had an experience where there's a colleague or somebody that just is unnatural at pulling information from kids, right? And just like has this figured out for how to get kids not only to learn and understand, but remember. And when you really watch one of these educators carefully, they do some things that are different than what perhaps we experienced as students, or what comes now. What?
I feel like I should be taking notes. I'm sorry.
What? Oh.
Taking notes. Like, okay, what are the things they do? I have to know.
So you have a conversation with a student about a topic. You say, hey, you're struggling with absolute value. Let's look at a couple example problems, right? You break out the whiteboard and you do the sample problem. You walk through it with the student, right? And then you erase it. You write the same problem and say, solve it. And the kid says, what? And you're like, no, you just did this. Let's pull it out of your brain and do it again. And then 15 minutes later, you walk over to their desk with the whiteboard with the same problem written down and you give it to them. And it's that continuous retrieval practice. And you see some teachers do this just naturally. And that's what we have to build into our vocabulary, this continued pull it out of your brain, so that it becomes automatic and it gets really lodged into that long-term memory.
Well, you came up with the chat related to this. Think about how that practice of having the student go back and forth and really help them master understanding helps their stress in the final assessment and any assessment. How can that give them the ease? Because they know it because they've been confident in doing it. They've explained it, they've written it, they've worked with other people to teach them how to do it. They've been taught the information. This constant circling effect. Then the scary assessment that we as teachers legally have to give comes, and it's like, you know what you're doing. You're just,
it's not scary.
Same thing you did yesterday. It's nothing different. Don't add
exactly
to this. You're a master at this already. This is just to check a box. You already have mastered this concept. Checking the box is a joke. Fear does it anyway.
Right. Well, and it's really easy to fall into the trap as a teacher. I mean, let's go back to the class of 34, 35 students, right? One strategy we use is, okay, pair up the students or a group of students so you can talk to multiple students at once. Do it, right? There's power to social learning. Totally get it. But when the rubber hits the road, every student has to be able to explain it to you. So when I have kids coming up to me in a group, like I do this with the grid method a lot. Like, okay, you guys are working on 2B as a group. Why don't you all come up to me and explain what you've got? Student A will give an explanation that's spot on. I look to student C and I say, rephrase what they just said. Because you have to check that with each student. And if you're not checking it with each student and pulling that out of their brain, then you're not going to get the outcomes that, number one, you want, and number two, the students are capable of doing.
Well, the best part is if you go do this, teachers, if you're listening right now and you do that, you have to make them repeat it in a different way. They can't just repeat the sentence. They need to rephrase it. And that gets really hard, but it's really important. If the first student says a sentence and the second student says the same sentence, you've completely lost the purpose of this activity.
Absolutely. And so, we all as teachers, we have huge burdens upon us, right? We have common assessments. In Ohio, we have the Ohio 5-step process where we give a pre-assessment and then we do interventions and then we do a post-assessment and we analyze the data. And so assessment becomes a bad word. You say assessment in a teacher's lounge or at a staff meeting, and people are just like, oh, they feel crushed, they feel defeated. We need to reclaim that word, because that word assessment is one of the most powerful tools in our arsenal. And so we need to think about assessment not as a test. We need to think of assessment as how can this assessment develop the learning, not end it. I clearly can talk about this for a really, really long time.
Well, I have one more question for you. If you are listening right now and want to shoot us a question that we can discuss, or you want to hear Tiffany's thoughts and something that maybe you talk about in the Twitter chat, please make sure to post that, because I don't want to have us get off of this live video recapping this chat and I'd be still questioning. Okay, I like that, but how? I like that, but when? So make sure you're asking those questions. Tiffany, my question for you before we end our time today is, was there any question that you were excited to hear the answers about outside of the last two questions that we discussed? Is there anything you wrote you were like, all right, this is going to be a big one?
Can I say two?
I'll let you say two. Yeah.
Okay. So the intro question, the 5 words. I will almost always throw a question when I moderate a chat that has a strict word limit, right? Give me 5 words on this and that's it. And constraints breed creativity. There's tons of research that shows that. And so I was really, I know you hated that question, but you hated it.
In the preview, Jeff was like, how do you do it, Ray? I'm like, I picked like the most boring words ever.
But your answer in the chat was much better. So you win. It's about growth, Ray. It's about growth. But you know, and it's always so fun to me to read things like that, because the range of responses is great. And it's like, that gives me a taste of what the chat's going to be. So you had, I'd say about half of the responses were assessment is a tool that we use and it informs practices. And then half of the responses were very much like, assessment makes me cry. Like, it's harmful and it hurts kids and all this kind of stuff. And so that was fun, because I knew as soon as I saw that here we go. And then the other one, the one rate on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective you think summative assessment is. And did you miss that?
Completely missed that question. I know another world in this chat. What question number was that? I completely missed that one.
I think it might have been number 3.
Oh, I think very far into discussion past 2, so I probably missed 3 and got back on by 5 or something.
But it was interesting, because that's really where we started getting into the conversations about, where I asked people, okay, so if that's how you use a summative assessment, how is that not formative assessment? Because the people who rated it as a 1 or a 2 were very much in the mindset of an assessment, a summative assessment is the end. And what's the point of using that for student learning? And then some people rated it like an 8 or a 9, and they said, because it informs my next step. And so then immediately I'm like, then what's the difference? What are we talking about here? And I loved it. At one point, somebody, I don't remember who, of course, said, why is there such a focus on all the different IVs, summative, formative? Like, why does that matter? And so on one hand, I'm arguing that it really doesn't, because the way you're using your summative assessment or the way you're using your formative assessment is what really matters. But on the other hand, I think that distinguishing between these different kinds of assessment has helped bring the assessment conversation a little bit more into the light. And I think that's powerful. But I don't want people to get so caught up in formative or summative or whatever. The key to assessment, are you using it to change learning? And that's the bottom line.
You know, I really hope that Jeff is not listening right now, because I'm about to spill the beans on a podcast recording we did that's not out yet. So Jeff, exit out. But we just did a podcast recording with Lavana Roth, and it's not out yet. You should totally listen to it. She was amazing. Yeah. But when we asked her what her biggest excitement about education was, spoiler alert, she said, I love how frustrated teachers are. And
really?
I sat back during the recording. Obviously it's not on camera, but I sit back and I'm like, what? Like, that's a response to what you love about where education is going, what's getting you excited about education? And she's like, I love that people are frustrated, because that's how change starts. People are frustrated enough, and that's how they start growing. And that relates so well to what you just said, is while all the words might be creating frustration, that's how conversations are really started, because teachers are eager to find solutions, so that frustration has a positive effect on us being passionate about finding a solution. And I thought that was so incredibly insightful. It was my favorite response we've ever had to that question on our podcast. But how powerful is teachers actually taking a stand, having the power to discuss it? So cool.
Well, let's parallel to that for just a second. And how often, when we're working with teachers, when we're training teachers, do we try and emphasize to them that if your students are feeling frustrated, that's a good thing? That means that they are like, I mean, you don't want them so frustrated they're crying, but that frustration level is really where learning happens. When the brain is feeling a little stressed, when the brain is having to actually work, that's when it happened. And so I am struck again and again, and someday I'll write a book about this. But the connections between teaching students and teaching teachers, and helping students learn and grow, and helping teachers learn and grow. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly the same things that we seek out in our students for high quality educational experiences are the same things that teachers desperately need. So frustration, bring it on, right? Let's challenge and push and grow. It's what we ask our students to do every day they're in our classrooms. And it's what we should ask ourselves to do every day we're in the classroom.
I love that. The podcast, for those of you that are not listening yet, which you're like totally living under a rock, come on, join our podcast, is Teach Better Talk. And by the way, if y'all have any educators that you love to be featured on Teach Better Talk, you should totally connect with them. All right, so we also have another question. It says, how can the assessment develop the learning and not end it?
Mm-hmm. So I've actually done something interesting this year, I think, and I have Adam Yankai to thank for it. He is one of my colleagues at Western Reserve Academy, and he does not give any unit tests whatsoever at all. And I don't either now. What I do is every day we have a skills check. It's like we've broken up the year into, right now, I think I have 85 different learning targets for my students. And every day we have a 6-question skills check that pulls from any one of those 85 learning targets. And so we're practicing retrieving the information. And then they do skills check corrections on that and have continuous conversations with me until they show me they understand the content on the skills check. And so the assessment is not at the end of the unit, study and cram. The assessment is every day we're digging into what you know and what you learned and how we can apply that moving forward. And so sometimes it takes like a radical shift like that, saying, nope, not doing it. And I know that not everybody has the freedom to do that. Some people have to give an end of unit assessment. And if you do, that's fine. But consider also building in those other pieces. 3 questions every class that pull back on 2 months ago.
And that's important. You mentioned there are small steps you can take to start building towards the philosophy that you want in your classroom. You can't let someone's bad philosophy or the opportunity for students to have bad teaching in the future lead to bad instruction and growth right now. So if there's elements that you don't have power over, that's life. And we're going to problem solve through them, just like our students continue to problem solve through their struggles. But there are steps you can take to fitting within the box you need to fit in while still creating the culture you're hoping to achieve for your students.
Well, and that conversation applies in so many areas. If we think about grading too, you talk to a lot of teachers about standards-based grading and how you can use that in your classroom. But what if you're in a classroom where you have a traditional grade book and you have to give traditional grades? There's baby steps you can take. Don't put in assignments. Don't put in assignments, put in learning targets. Boom. You have taken your step towards standards-based grading. You may have to turn that into an A, B, C, D, or F at the end of the quarter, but you have taken the step. And so it's all about like, where are you? Where is this vision of where you want to be? And then move. Like, so many people get frozen by, I don't know how to do this, or I can't do this, because we just have to move. Keep moving forward every day. That's our Teach Better philosophy, isn't it, Ray?
Yeah, I know. Gosh, there's blogs on that. Like I said, I just posted so many Instagram things this week on I don't think it knows with the master chat topics. I think we're like strangely connected.
we have like this multi-state like telepathy connection, right? That, now we're starting to lose it. All right.
So just to recap, Tiffany, amazing chat. Thank you for bringing this conversation that's challenging, it's hard. Thank you for bringing it to the table, because not only was there incredible insight on assessment and really deep conversations on it, but it was a great reminder for us teachers that we are challenging our students. You need to continue to be a student, keep challenging your growth, and let yourself be a little uncomfortable and frustrated so you can start asking those more difficult questions, because we're better than just the cookie cutter, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm not sure I can do it. You can do it. Let's fill the gray area and help us really be education disruptive as we go.
That's right. I love it. I love it. I love it.
All right. We will see you next week for Mastery Chat. So,
we're talking about equity in education with Ray Steinmetz. He's the blended math guy. Yeah. So equity in education is going to be a good topic.
He also was just on the podcast on Teach Better Talk. So we can fill our whole week with Ray.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys, for watching. Make sure you join us next week for Mastery Chat.
See you later.
Bye-bye.